Hey, Um, good to have you here, Mark. And I have pressed the record button, so that's an awesome start for me. And this is Michael Naylor, and I'm coming to you from South Portland, Maine, on this cold, damp day in mainland, and talking to Mark, who's on the other side of the ocean from us in the UK, and looking forward to hearing about his experience as a type 4 on the Enneagram, which is also my type. And so it's a particularly it's a group I'm fond of as my cousins. So just wanted to welcome you. Great to see you, and just would love to hear a bit about you, how you discovered the Enneagram, you know, sort of how that unfolded for you, and how it brought you to your latest state of enlightenment or unenlightenment. And anyway, just jump on in, and just great to have you here. And if my voice starts to fade, just sort of wave to me and say hello. So greetings.
Michael, thank you. It's lovely to be here with you. As you say, from across the Atlantic. It's the way we do it these days, isn't it? Zoom seems to be ruling the world.
It's the new spiritual path, for sure. Yeah, so tell me a bit about how you discovered the Enneagram, and how that has unfolded for you.
Sure. Well, as you say, I'm a partner type 4 to your beautiful type 4. It's so now I know enough about the Enneagram, I think, to say this, Michael. When I look at all the posts you put on Facebook, you are such a beautiful 4. You really so vibrant and full of the joys of life and everything. It's great to see. I first discovered the Enneagram, I think it was January or February 2014. 6 years ago, and I was in California with my then wonderful girlfriend, and she had been talking a lot about this, and she said, why don't you have a go? So I said, okay, I'll sign up. So she signed me up to darling David Daniels' introductory course with the narrative tradition. And I went through that week with him and Peter, and it was fascinating, but it was also confusing, because the first time, I think maybe many other people out there can relate to this, the first Enneagram course you do is pretty confusing, especially if you haven't really settled into your type, etc., etc. So anyway, I listened, and I think I was certainly pointing in the direction of a 4 at that time. My lovely girlfriend was very well versed in the Enneagram, and she was saying, maybe look at the 4, maybe the 7. Anyway, I got into it, and that was the first part of 2014. And then, funny enough, I took your course with the Enneagram Institute. I think it was June 2014 there in California as well. And I never forget that week with you, because having done David's and having got the grounding, the Enneagram Institute's way of going through the types so thoroughly, which I found to be perhaps at the time a little bit more thorough than what we'd done with David. As you read out, and you did each type so thoroughly, and you stood on the stage in your beautiful gregarious way, your beautiful 4-ish way, and you went to, and when you started describing the 4, I think there were about 50 people in the room or something, and I can remember tears just started coming down my face, because I literally felt as though I had come home. I'd come home to something, and still wasn't quite sure what, but something landed, something went chunk inside me, and it was just landing into type 4, as you described it. It just, everything just resonated so deeply. And one comment you said at the time, which has echoed in my heart ever since, was that you said the 4s have a tendency to wallow in melancholy. Oh boy, did that land. Because that was your comment, Michael, and literally, sometimes I even use it with clients today, and not necessarily just because I'm trying to indoctrinate them into the Enneagram. If they are wallowing in melancholy, I say, maybe it's time to stop wallowing in melancholy. And every time I use it, I think of you. So it's very touching. So that's how I came to start to fall into type 4. And the rest really is history. I mean, I've gone through and done many, many other subsequent courses with the Enneagram Institute over the last several years, and attended many workshops with Russ Hudson, et cetera, et cetera. But that's where it all started. That in 2014, 6 years ago, is when it all unfolded for me.
Well, awesome. And I can remember that particular training. What a powerful group that was. And so I was thinking, in my journey of discovery as a type 4, which for me landed in 1996, when my Gurdjieff teacher said, you might want to read about the type 4, just see how that reads. And I read it, and I felt like somebody had just torn the skin off me and could look inside my soul, and oh my God. And then of course I figured, I don't know how this guy, Riso, Hudson, whoever they were, mapped this out, but now I had the map, so it should take about 2 weeks to get this stuff handled. And then I've noticed it's been more like crawling on my hands and knees up a mountainside. And so I've just noticed like there's like a new layer that seems to get peeled off every year. Just when I think I'm sort of home, then I'll discover another awakening where all of a sudden something that's been going on for 30 years, I didn't notice it. And then I go, oh my God, and I'm horrified and then remorseful, and then I have a chance to work with it. But so I just wondered, how's your growth path been like since you discovered the Enneagram and the 4-ness and things that entail?
It's been an amazing journey, Michael. And I want to state very openly for the record that one of the reasons I did it at the time, quite apart from that lovely girlfriend interesting me in it and being so well versed in it and etc., was I was also and still am in recovery from addiction. So I'm 53 today. I've been in recovery from addiction and attending 12-step meetings, etc., since 2004. And my addiction, the addiction that has literally nearly killed me on more than one occasion, is sex addiction. Mm-hmm. I was very touch deprived as a child in a healthy way, and the touch I did get was very brutal. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, I came to yearn and crave touch. And so, of course, what better addiction to fill that emptiness inside me than sex addiction? Mm-hmm. And sadly, very inappropriate and seeking all kinds of sex just to get my needs met. So that unfolded through my life, and that's been going on for a large chunk of 53 years. Then I came into recovery in 2004, and I started to get sort of a handle on addiction and what it was all about. But I made the mistake of pinning my hopes, pinning my understanding of my problems on one thing, which was being sent to a boarding school aged 8 and having a very, very bad time. But of course, it wasn't that. I mean, that didn't help. But my problem started the day I was born, because I was born to a mum who handed me to a nanny who brutalized me. Mm. So of course, and I didn't discover that until 3 years ago, age 50. So through my whole process of recovery, sadly, I spent a lot of time paddling upstream with only half a paddle, because a lot of the facts were missing. And when when the Enneagram came into my life, one of the most amazing things it started to do was help me calm down, because I had spent such a large portion of my life in an incredibly defensive and defiant state, because I saw life through the lens of fear because of what was done to me as a child. So I grew up fearful. I grew up not trusting women because it was a woman who abused me for the first time. And I grew up with rage inside me against women. You could almost say I simultaneously feared and hated women for most of my life, which is an extraordinary thing to say today. Because if you'd asked me if you told me 10 years ago through some crystal ball, oh, you're a woman hater, I'd have laughed at you. I'd have said, what? Get out of here. I'm not a woman hater, but I was. Mm-hmm. But of course, it was all deep inside me. So that all played out. But when the Enneagram came into my life, which was, let's not forget, 12 years after I first came into recovery, what it really, 10 years exactly. what it really did was started to show me that just because somebody else has another opinion doesn't make them right or wrong, doesn't make them better or worse, it just makes them different. And I think that's one of the greatest gifts the Enneagram has given me, and it's unfolded ever subsequently through the years to help me settle more and more into non-judgment of others, better acceptance of others. But of course, at the core of it all, what it helped me start to find, even though it took me a lot longer after that first course, was acceptance of self. So I think at the root of all my problems was an utter lack of self-acceptance dating back to the day I was born, because it was never mirrored to me in my family. My family was very austere, very Victorian. My father was in the forces, and so there was a lot of discipline, not all of it helpful. So I learned to defend myself. I learned that secrecy was my best defense, and I learned that I didn't learn how to connect with others. That was it. That was the problem. So the Enneagram started to change all that. Now it would take. As I say, I started investigating the Enneagram in January 14. It would take years more to start to actually have a meaningful part in my life, because it would take another few years, as it turned out, to get to the real core truth of what was done to me, so that I could finally stop holding women, especially my mother, with such resentment, which was tragic. But she's dead now, and I have nothing but love in my heart for her, because I have found the peace that I only wish I'd found many, many years ago. So I would say one of the greatest gifts that the Enneagram gave me was learning tolerance and acceptance of other people, but even more important than that, learning tolerance and acceptance of myself.
Awesome. Beautiful. Well, it's quite a journey. And in many, many ways, you're right on time from my perspective. So I just wondered, in terms of sometimes, Riso Hudson Enneagram, we call the type 4 the individualist, the introspective, sensitive type. And I know as a little guy, there was, I just had a natural, the first thing I noticed a lot is I felt an extraordinary longing for something I couldn't put my hands on, like an emptiness, a sorrow, like this mysterious longing that would tug on me the second I would wake up. And, as a little guy, I had no words for it. And, but it created an orientation for me to always be kind of examining my inner world, to go inward in a lot more extreme ways than most of my friends. And so there was this sense of almost like looking for the missing piece. And the big thing for me was the longing sense of emptiness and feeling on just a deep level of feeling disconnected and not belonging with people. And I grew up in a family that was very user friendly. My mother and father were, for the most part, very kind. But there I was, and I ended up manifesting that as being a pretty shy kid, and also noticing it, and this may be true for fours in general, that I seem to have more affinity with what might be classically called feminine qualities: sensitivity, gentleness, easily cries. I mean, I was probably the biggest crier on my baseball team. We would lose and I'd be in tears. And so anyway, that's a lot to throw out. I just wonder if you, had that experience of longing, and how, it sounds like certainly for me, that was one of the, I've been in recovery, seemed like just after I was born, but, I've been in recovery for almost 40 years. And, that longing, emptiness, weirdness was one of the things that when I used substances or sex or whatever, it would fill that up for a little while, and then it would be gone again, and I'd have to do it again. So I just wondered what is true for you in terms of that kind of internal awareness, sensitivity, looking inside, and all of that. That's a lot to throw at once. Or just pick and choose what you want to respond to.
Michael, thank you. It's a beautiful question, and it lands very deeply in my heart. I love you to bits because you are so open and so soft and gentle. You've inspired me for years, all the years I've known you. And as I say, I follow you on Facebook because everything you post is so tangibly gentle. You know, how you interact with your beautiful wife and the photographs you post, etc. There's even a healthy jealousy, I think. But the sensitivity and the longing was enormous. My family was very stalwart, very traditional, very disciplined. There was not a lot of space for emotion or tears. And so I learned very young that this was not appreciated, that my darling father, he died on your Independence Day in 2017. And he wasn't an emotional man. He went through the war. His father was an admiral. He went through 1.5 wars. And so, of course, the emotion had been trained out of my father. I don't blame him anymore. It was very sad. So I learned to suppress what I now understand is an immense femininity, a gentleness, a sensitivity. Mm. I sit here today with long hair, which I happen to adore because I feel softer and more feminine. For about 15 years, I had a crew cut from the age of, I don't know what it was, 30 to 45 roughly. I just literally got a pair of clippers once a month and went straight over my head, and it was about 1/2 inch long for over 10 years. And then the same wonderful girlfriend that actually introduced me to the Enneagram, she noticed when I started to grow my hair out for my brother's wedding in end of 2014, funny enough. And she started to see a much more feminine side of me when my hair started to grow longer. I wanted it to be a normal length for the wedding photographs. I didn't want to look too aggressive. So I was aware that I did look aggressive. And she said, why don't you let your hair grow longer? It's really nice. You look softer. So I said, oh, okay, fine. Why not? So I did. Well, of course, the only 2 people on planet Earth who didn't like it were my parents. Everybody else commented and said, wow, Mark, you look younger, you look softer, you look more relaxed. I mean, it suits you. And a few people that knew me well and had some inkling about recovery said, you look more feminine. And I really said, yeah, that's because I am. This is me. And I started to feel, it was a bit awkward at first because I needed a lot more shampoo for a while. But it was, I started to actually feel the person I actually believe I am. And that person was suppressed around about the age of 5 when I started to struggle, consciously struggle. And I knew that within my family, that pretty, beautiful, curious, very creative, sensitive side of me, there was no place for it in my family. I have 4 brothers. We were expected to be perfectly English gentlemen, dress as we were told, polish our shoes, and as we got a bit older, shave, have our hair done, parted and brushed, and all this kind of thing. So when I started to grow my hair out, both of my parents struggled hugely because they started to say to me, to my face, why don't you cut your hair? It makes you look like a woman. And I didn't have the courage at the time to say, well, maybe that's what I am. Maybe. So what if I look like a woman? What's wrong with looking like a woman? What's wrong with being a gentler, softer man? Why do I have to look like a convict with a short haircut or a policeman or an army recruit? I don't want to anymore because it produced a lot of conflict. So I now know, looking back, and again, this is where the Enneagram has finally settled as a really useful, powerful tool to help me, let alone how I might use it to influence my interactions with other people. It started to help me understand this is the person I am. And with finally, age 53, I really feel happy with that. I like this person. I'm trying not to look at my image on the screen here, but I like this Mark Prax.
Yeah.
I look back at photographs of me with that crew cut haircut, and I think, God, that was an angry looking man. That was an aggressive looking man. So yes, the longing to, and I've had that longing inside me for decades. That's been a conscious knowing, because I would go to crazy clubs in London for decades. I would act out in my sex addiction. I would go to the underbelly of London and plumb the depths of places which really were not very safe, let alone pretty at the time. But it got me what I needed, and I was able to dress up or dress down or take my clothes off and express a much more feminine side of me. I dressed in a very feminine way in those clubs. And I felt so good. I felt so connected. I felt so real. But I couldn't dress out in front of my family or normal, vanilla friends, as we tended to know them, because they would question my sexuality. There'd be too many questions, and I wasn't ready to answer them. I didn't know who I was for most of my life. I was playing a role that my parents needed me to play, so they were comfortable. And I think and now I work with the male clients I help. I see this all the time. I see men time and time again in the workshops I give. I see men pouring their heart out to me, just wanting to be seen as a sensitive, beautiful creature, not this vision that their parents have demanded they be for however long. So, Michael, the longing to be me, the longing to express that beautiful, soft, creative, vibrant, beautiful, precious, more feminine side of myself, which has taken me most of half a century to finally have the courage to express. God, do I wish I'd been able to do this 25, 30 years ago, and I would have had a very different life. But hey, I got there eventually. So yeah, the longing and the sensitivity has been a huge part of my life.
Well, it seems to be, this is my own story about it, so it's, but it seems that type 4s, that disconnect between what's real in them and what they were taught to be is something that is extremely painful, that they can't avoid unless they take strong addictive actions to kind of crush it or assuage it. And that, I think all of the types, as they come into more awareness, get in contact with that urge to be real. But it seems like 4s don't escape it. They're like tortured from the get-go, and that sets them up for an interesting and hardy journey through the tundra of emotional reality. So it's an interesting thing. I know one of the things that we talk about with the type 4 is that because their inner life is so alive, especially their emotional wave that comes through them. For type 4s, it's like at any moment I can check and see, well, where's my emotional temperature right now? If someone says, how are you doing? I say, good right now. Check in a half an hour. The weather changes, but there was so I was really aware as a kid is just how my awareness was on the emotion of the moment, and whereas other people, it didn't seem to matter so much. I just didn't quite understand it. And it has taken many, many, many years to finally notice that emotional wave has relaxed, and there's a more of a steady, gentle stream. I still can go up and down, but there's underneath it, it feels like there's kind of a foundation of, this is dressing it up with words, but like a quiescence. There's like a quiescent container that holds everything. But prior to my growth, it was more like it was oceanic and changing all the time. So I just wondered what you've noticed about your own emotional waves, and how you've navigated that, and just how that's changed over time.
Michael, fun enough, it's taken other people to point that out to me, especially in the last 3 years, to really finally understand that. Because for years and years, people that don't know me, some of your listeners won't know me, I'm at 6'8.5" tall, or 2 meters and 4.5 centimeters in European language. And that's very tall. And so I have an unavoidably large presence. When I walk into a room, you can't not see me. I'm a whole head above many people. So that presented its own problems. Because when I was in a good mood, I could be the life and soul of the party, and lucky that a man of my height and stature is in a good mood, because you wouldn't want to see me in a bad mood. It's kind of like the Incredible Hulk, you don't make me angry. And sometimes when I was heavy, when I wasn't able to be present, when I was when my mind was wrangling with problems or feeling hurt or upset or lost or not seen, excuse me, or not seen, you could see it. You could see it a mile away. It's like a lighthouse. I am like a lighthouse. So of course, I would broadcast this dark, heavy energy. And it's taken some brave friends through the last 3 years in particular to finally have the courage to say to me things like, one person said, Mark, you don't realize how you impact others. When you're in a bad mood, it's very hard to be around you because you're so huge. You radiate so much dark energy. It's oppressive.
Yeah, I'm laughing because I can relate.
Yeah, and I can remember thinking, wow, really? God, I'm so sorry. And so now I'm actually very aware of that. I was somewhat aware of my size, my physical stature, but not of my emotional impact on others. And that is what I think I can finally say to you with great relief. There is finally balance in the Force, to use a Star Wars parlance. There's a balance between the dark and the light side of my life. The dark side is there, but I embrace it. And the light side is also beautiful, but I don't try and grab too much of it in an addictive way. So I think I finally figured a balance, but my pendulum has stopped swinging crazily from one extreme to the other. And that, of course, is what's brought me the peace I enjoy today. I'm not fighting the world. I'm not trying to hide from it. I can't avoid it. So I walk around and I communicate with my friends. I look people in the eye and I treat them with respect. I think the sovereignty of other people is something I've also come to finally understand too, because I took people for granted for so long. I never faced the consequences of my acting out behaviors for too long. And they all caught up with me about 3 years ago. And now I respect the reverent soul of everyone I interact with. I try very hard to be present, to give every single person I interact with, whoever it is, whether it's a shopkeeper, or whether it's a good friend, whether it's a client, whether it's you right now, I bring myself to you and I'm here. I'm not wandering off. I'm not checking my emails on another screen, whatever it might be. I'm just here. You've invited me to this meeting. You deserve all of me. And anyone that wants to interact with me, you deserve all of me. You don't deserve half of me or 3/4 of me or 1/4 of me. And of course, that was the same in relationships. Unfortunately, I've spent a tragic number of years trying to have relationships, but failing because I was never there. I mean, I was there some of the time, but not all the time. When I wasn't there, my mind was off wandering some crazy path, looking for my next fix or getting high on what I might be doing in 2 weeks' time behind someone's back. I mean, it was a tragic way to live, but all triggered by a desperate need to get my touch and my emotional needs met at the expense of others. So yeah, finally, my emotionality, I believe, has finally come home to roost. I'm settled and I'm at peace because I'm aware of how I've used other people. I'm aware of how I've hurt myself. And I'm very, very proud to choose not to do it anymore because I don't need it.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking in my own experience, the word infatuation gets pinned on fours a lot. And, and that infatuation, for me, I experienced it from a number of different ways. One is idealizing a person, place, or thing, and then being really disappointed because the infatuation disappeared. And I figured it was probably their fault. But I can remember at one point, one of the things I think fours share is this wish to find the soulmate, the person who will, bring them out of their suffering, allow them to express their beauty and meet them and mirror them perfectly. And, because of that suffering that we had as little ones. And the way that used to manifest in me was, I swear every day I would see a woman and think, that's the one, that's the soulmate. Oh my God. And then I would track along and then another one would go in the other direction. I'd go, that's the one. And I would feel it in my heart and soul. And my teacher said, Michael, what you're doing, which is okay, is you're casting your feminine animus into an object outside of you and trying to find yourself in her.
Beautiful.
Core of addiction. And he said, how's that going for you? I said, well, I saw 15 soulmates today. What does that tell you? He says, it's not working. No, it's not working. So what he rerouted me to do, aside from stay sober, is to start to discipline myself in my creativity. He said, as you start to embrace and express that animus energy through your creativity, it's not going to get cast into the object as easily. You'll actually be able to notice it and not get sucked into it. Because when I would have that attraction, it would feel like it was like an energetic circuit would connect, and I felt like I must follow. I must follow. It's like survival, right? So I mean that's addiction and confusion. But I wondered, your relationship with infatuation. Now, various ways you've experienced it. I know you've said quite a bit about it, but what does that resonate for you when you hear that word infatuation?
Michael, as you were very kindly and honestly sharing some of your past experiences, I was giggling because you were describing me. I could be sitting at a stoplight in my car and a woman will walk across a pedestrian crossing in front of me, and she might, tick all the boxes in terms of being a physical match for my personal desires. I would spend the rest of the day idolizing her, fantasizing, thinking, even sometimes thinking, how can I find her? Well, yes. That was a pedestrian crossing near Piccadilly in London. She must live in the area. Maybe if I go and walk the streets, I could find, maybe I'll see her again. Maybe that's her regular commute home from work. If I'm there at roughly the same time tomorrow, maybe I could wait for her. I mean, this is insanity. This is nuts. And I have tragically on rare occasions, in London, we have our famous, we call it the Tube, the underground railway system that crosses all over London. And I used to use that to commute many years ago. And I would be on the Tube. And if on one occasion, I saw a lady down one of the carriages, and I followed her out of the carriage. I followed her into up the escalator and heading towards back to the street level. And I went up behind her and I grabbed hold of her arm. Mm-hmm. Without even thinking. Mm-hmm. But that's probably going to scare the hell out of her. A complete stranger walking out. And then of course, I'm huge. And she turned around and looked up at me and went, what do you want? What do you want? I went, nothing. I just wanted to tell you I think you're very beautiful. And she told me where to go, and using, let's just call it the F word, shall we? And I was left standing there thinking, well, what the hell's wrong with you? I only wanted to tell you you're beautiful. And of course, I set my heart, even in this insanely short time of seeing her in a train carriage and then walking up the escalator and then grabbing her. I mean, these days, that's called assault. let's not mince my words here. So, I mean, I remember that I'm talking 30 years ago, I remember doing that. But that's where my desperation to be in a feminine space with a woman led me. And of course, over many years later, it's taken its toll, because I have tried to throw myself into relationships, sometimes so deeply that I've put people off. And then, of course, when I didn't get my needs met, when they weren't ready for that level of love, and I use the word love with sadly mixed emotions, because, of course, I've used that to get what I wanted as well. When they didn't reciprocate, and I'm confused. I mean, don't you love me? Don't you want me? I want you. I want to marry you. I mean, you're my perfect woman. Kind of thing. And so, oh, Michael, I mean, it's, bless you for laughing, and I know you're laughing with sympathy, because I know, being a fellow before, I know you understand this. But the whole infatuation thing, and to me, it all comes back to the utter desperation to be seen and heard, to connect with another human being, which of course I didn't as a child. I didn't connect with my beloved therapist. I've got an amazing therapist these days who I see periodically, and he has done some incredible work with me through the last probably year and a half. And he actually really finally polarized the whole issue of attachment for me. And he said, Mark, there are various forms of attachment. I'm going to make it really simple for you. You didn't attach at all. You've not got disorganized or whatever type of attachment. You just didn't attach to either parent, period, full stop.
Yeah.
And I said, actually, that makes a hell of a lot more sense than trying to figure out what type of dysfunctional attachment I've got. I didn't. My father was never there. My mother literally handed me to an abusive nanny straight from the womb. So of course I didn't attach. So of course then I go out into life desperate to have all the attachment needs met that were never met by my darling mum, because she just didn't know how to. And you know, a family like mine who had enough money for nannies, that's what you did 50 years ago. You handed your children to nannies if you could afford them, so you could get on with your life and keep doing whatever you wanted to do. Tragically, we now know today that's not a good thing to do to a baby. But unfortunately, that's what happened to me. So I've spent most of my life craving, searching for that attachment, to heal that attachment wound very dysfunctionally with every woman I've seen, from walking across the pavement to one that I might have coaxed into my bed. Yeah. And of course, it's not surprisingly destroyed every relationship I've ever had. That's why I'm unmarried with no children. It's not a coincidence. So, Michael, I would suggest that, I hope that answers your question. My problems with infatuation have left me leading a very unhappy life when I look back.
Well, it's one of the reasons I was smiling is I have so many parallel experiences of doing virtually the same thing, a couple thousand here and there, of you know, that infatuation, and it's so compelling. It's like my soul is coming out of my heart, and it's found a connection. So I must go towards that object. And then if that object disappoints, I will be very upset that you let me down. But if it works for a while, then that's good, but it's not going to last. I learned it's good for 3 days or 3 months. But it all came from just a soul hunger to feel connected with, completed with, mirrored, and it's a combination of a lot of complex things, but it came out in, I can remember, you know, here I'd be in a bookstore thinking I'm going to look for a book, and there'd be 3 or 4 soulmates. I go, uh-oh, there's 4. What do I do? One of them must be it. And so I might go up and say, like yourself, I'd say, excuse me, I just wanted to let you know how beautiful you are. And they would go, oh, okay, well, thank you. And then they would go back to their book. I'm going, what am I doing wrong here? Don't you realize my soul is infused with yours, and we should have a, come on, man, you're like, and it was so irrational. I couldn't even piece it together, but I went on many funny journeys that way. And today I'm really noticing the way infatuation comes up is, you know, it could happen in other ways where I got infatuated about somebody who I thought was this awesome person. And then I would there's something about infatuation that's kind of like a drug high. It's like, ooh. And so I like going into that drug high. And today I can notice, oh, here I am admiring this person, but I'm also, there's infatuation that's kind of juicing it up even more and making it almost like an otherworldly spiritual thing. And so today I can notice that and go, okay, take a breath, come down. This is a human being. And as what is it, Richard Rohr said when he was being interviewed by Oprah, she said, what percentage of the day are you present on a good day? And he said, well, Oprah, on a good day, I'm close to 35% present. And she went, what? I'm shocked. She says, well, it used to be only 5%. I'm doing awesome. Right? And so I just remembered everybody's, you know, there's this idealized person, place, or thing in front of me. And then there's the fact that, you know, they're not idyllic. They're human. They're just like myself. They bump into each other. So I'm grateful to be able to see that. And it, you know, the good fortune is in finding Donna is whatever that crazy, hungry, desperate reach for heart resolution, you know, really has been healed in many, many ways from, you know, with genuine loving kindness. really what I was looking for, and oftentimes didn't even know if I was getting it for a long time. I'd brush it off and think. So anyway, I'm jabbering on here. Just wondering for you, this is always a hard question when it get asked of me, and I'll defer to you forevermore. If you were, if someone says, well, how can I help my type 4 son or daughter? I notice they get really reactive and really intense and have a hard time being satisfied. And, what do you suggest aside from, I'd say, well, give them 50 years and see if it's shifted. Anything that comes to mind for you?
Absolutely. And this is from having friends to stay in my home, watching my younger brother has got 2 young boys, who one of which is 5 today. I've got to ring him actually. And the other one is 3 or 3.5. Watching people with children. There are so many times in my life where I've watched parents, whether it be in a supermarket or on the street or in a cinema or even friends sometimes with their children, chastise a child and in doing so attack the soul, not the behavior. And I think for a 4 in particular, if you confuse, if you're talking to a child and you confuse a behavior which isn't helpful, whether it's damaging or being rude or whatever it might be, with the soul of the natural effervescent light of that beautiful little child. If you mix the 2 up, you're going to cause damage. You've got to me, get authentic and real with the soul, with the person, with the beautiful, natural, undamaged, deserving of love and understanding and presence child before you. And to me, I look back now, if all I wanted was for my father to see me. I'll give you a very good concrete example of how my darling father failed. And I wasn't even a child, but I'm still a child to him at the time. I think I was about 20 at the time. I'd been doing some carpentry for one of my brothers. My elder brothers had bought a new house, and I offered to go and help build some bookshelves and do a bit of carpentry and get him settled in his house, do lots of DIY, rather than save him some money, because I've always been very good at carpentry. So I was there for about 6 weeks. And at the end of that process, I built a big bank of cupboards and with shelves above, and it was really quite a spectacular piece of colour. I painted it all up, it was beautiful. And my brother, when I started the whole process, said, Marky, don't worry about the carpet. It's what came with the house. We're going to throw it away and buy a new one. You go ahead, work on the carpet, cover it in paint if you want. Doesn't matter. As soon as you're finished, we'll rip it up and buy a nice new one, and that's the best way to do it. I said, great, thank you very much. So I got on with my carpentry and made a mess, but it was all good. And my brother invited my mother and father around to lunch on a Sunday about 6 weeks later when I'd finished all this work. And I was so excited because I'd felt very proud. My brother was so, almost as a parent should be, so grateful, so truly, tangibly grateful for me putting my heart. He could see I put my heart and soul into it. And we really connected. And we still do. That brother and I are very close. And I was longing for my father to give me the same acceptance, recognition, commendation. And he turns up with my mum, and they walked into the room, and he looks at this big bit of carpentry. There was a whole wall. It was about over 10 feet of cupboards and things. And I was standing there, sort of literally nervous, on tenterhooks, on eggshells, waiting for my father to say something. And he looked me in the eye and he said, and this is a quote, because I'll never forget it. He said, Mark, yes, of course, a true carpenter would have put down a drop cloth.
Oh, God. Terrible.
I mean, I just stood there crestfallen. I didn't know what to look. I just felt, and I thought, a true carpenter. Right. Okay. Well, that must mean I'm a crap carpenter. And I mean and I was around about the age of 20 at the time. Now imagine doing that to children, and people do this to children. They just pull the rug from under their feet. So if I were to turn to anybody and say how the best way to help any child, irregardless of type, but especially a type 4, it's the good old A word. It's the authenticity word, Michael. It's allowing them to be themselves and not crushing their spirit. If I'd been allowed to be me, I would quite possibly have been on the stage, effervescently glowing, acting, communicating with people, showing that the beautiful, genuine, that I know today, feminine, fun, vibrant, creative self to the world, let alone to my carpentry. But I didn't do it, and I've kind of missed that boat. So I would say, when you talk to children, cherish their soul. If they do something wrong, yes, say I love you 100 times, whilst saying, probably best not to push that bookshelf over next time. It's not, that kind of behavior is not cool. But I love you, you know. Confront the behavior, but love the soul. And for a 4, see that 4, hear that 4, encourage that 4, and never suppress what a 4 wants to do from the perspective of what's coming out of that child as a creative interest. Never suppress it. Because who cares how much money you make? If you're doing something that is meaningful to you, like carpentry, like knitting, like painting, whatever, you don't have to be prime minister. You don't have to be a rich banker. Sod all that. Just encourage children to follow their hearts and encourage their creativity. That, to me, is the best thing you can do for a child.
Awesome. Well, it looks like you're ready for a child in your life.
I am a child, Michael. The child, you're looking at the child. You're looking at a 53-year-old adult cherishing his inner child at last. That's quite enough right now.
Okay. Well, we'll see what the universe sends your way. I know for me, getting to be in the role of being a dad has been so powerful and healing, and 4s who've had the capacity to work on themselves like you have, and have been given opportunities like we both have received through miracles and wonderful people, tend to really have a really kind of intimate awareness around what shames kids and what brings them forward. And so I just appreciating everything you said in that regard was beautifully put. And discerning between the behavior and the soul is powerful. For yourself, where does your creativity go these days? What is it? You mentioned in another, maybe perhaps the next lifetime, you'll be on stage doing your thing, although there's still plenty of time left for that. But where does your passion, creativity go today? How do you express that?
So, first of all, through lockdown, through the last 3 or 4 months, I've actually been building a summer house in my garden, which has been amazing. I've literally built about a 500 square foot building in the corner of my garden, and done the whole thing myself. I've had a great mate come and help me do some of the heavy lifting, but all the creativity, all the putting cedar on the walls, building the roof, it's all me. And that's been an immensely fun thing. I'm very lucky to have had the time, and what a perfect opportunity during lockdown, stuck in home, to indulge in such a big project. So that's sort of DIY on steroids. I love my carpentry. I have a double garage, which I've turned into a workshop. So at any moment now, any Sunday, I can go out there and I can create. Oh. So that I've finally, again, in my 50s, I've finally bought a home outside London, big enough to have space to have my own workshop, which I've been dreaming of doing for years. I laid out my tools and I can get creative. Beautiful. But in my work and in life with a work perspective, I also am going to get creative. I, about 2 years ago, had a really big emotional explosion in my life. And on the back of that, I decided to write out my life story, and in forensic detail. And this was also on the back of a trip to the Amazon to explore my past and learning things about my past I'd never learned before. And it's amazing what came out of me. I've now written about 120 pages of manuscript. And that I want to turn into a book. Awesome. And I can tell you the name of the book. It's going to be called Cliff Talk, because I visited a cliff, literally visited a cliff with an intent to die. a few years ago, because I got to a point of such self-loathing, because so much caught up with me. Again, spurred on by an amazing woman who helped me get there. And I, since then, have been on a very different path of recognizing how I got to that cliff. Luckily, was talked off it by a chaplain and a policeman. I'm still here today. And so what I'm now doing, I'm in a new phase of life where I want to give back. So many amazing people, including you, have helped me over the years to get stable and finally find the peace that was always inside me, but find more than just peace, to rediscover me, the vibrant, creative, fun, light-seeking creature. So I'm going to pour my heart into this book as a guide to both men and women. And if I were to describe the book as simply as possible, it's going to be a tool to help men and women see what abuse actually looks like. So men might read it and go, "Oh my God, I relate to that. That's abuse." And women might read it and go, "Wow, that's what he's doing to me. That's gaslighting. I'd never even heard the term gaslighting," etc., etc. So it's actually going to be, it'll be appropriate for men and women to read. And yes, there'll be some difficult parts of the book, but it's not going to be a depressing book. I will explore my childhood and I will share what happened to me so people understand why I became this frightened, secretive child. But by the end of the book, I believe I will have inspired people to get up off their bum and recognize we can change. We can, if we really want to, look inward. And the purpose, I suppose, is to inspire people to look inward. That's probably the greatest thing I want. If I can achieve that, then I'll have achieved something special. So that's my creative talents, and then talking about it. I love talking in conferences. I've talked at 2 so far this year, and I love putting this out there and spreading the word about how men come to hurt people without even realizing how they hurt themselves. How women can become better educated as to what abuse is, so that they don't think it's all their fault, etc., etc. Yeah. So I'm just creatively trying to put out there a lot of knowledge which I've acquired on the back of some very painful experiences.
Yeah, well, that's often the best knowledge in town. It gets culled and nurtured and enters our being. So, so anything else you would like to share about the 4 journey? If there'll be beloved 4s tuning in and hoping for some hope, and anything else that sort of stands out at this moment, or anything else you want to share about your story that is important, in your story that you
Michael, thank you. I could easily summarize by saying something like this. And this probably applies to everyone, but especially you beautiful, creative, maybe oppressed or suppressed or repressed 4s. Grab every day as if it's your last and recognize that you are enough. You've got so much beauty inside of you. You don't need to go seeking it, craving it, even addictively outside of yourself. I mistook the beautiful internal parts of me as emptiness for years. I thought I was an empty vessel, and I therefore had to go out and grab and get as much as I could from outside of me to fill this void, this painful, scary void that was inside me. Well, the irony is everything I needed to be happy was already inside me. And the void was just a place I used to go to protect myself in secrecy as a child. Now I know that I don't need to be afraid of women. I don't need to keep secrets. I'm therefore prepared to show the inside of me and cherish the inside of me. It's been there all along. I just poured tons and tons of addictive concrete on top of my beautiful, fragile, but precious and vibrant soul for years after I was abused through the first 12 years of my life. Yeah. So if whatever pain you've been through, you have the tools inside you. You remember this. The vibrant burst of light that entered this world the moment you were born is still inside you. Whatever you've done to suppress it or dim it, it's still there. And if you want to find it again, go look.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful message. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm so grateful for everything you've shared, and I'm, just appreciating for myself that, it's been really the thousand kindnesses of people that have, allowed my heart to come forward, and just grateful for you, and just the miracle that's come through you too. So, as Roar said, the first 50 years are warm up for the game that you've come here to play. So, as I say, you're right on time, and just really looking forward to further connection with you, and just sending you lots of love. Yeah.
Michael, I'm feeling deeply emotional, and I love you to pieces. Always have since that first course. Was it the Mercy Center?
It was at the Mercy Center.
Mercy Center in California, and
Yeah.
look, it was a merciful opportunity to connect with you, and you've inspired me ever since. I love you to bits, and thank you so much for talking to me today. It's been so special.
All my love to you too. All right, well, we'll be in touch. Bye.
Can't wait. God bless.
Yeah, thank you.